There's a strange comfort in letting something else do the hard thinking for you. Whether it's asking AI to write a breakup text or auto-generating your weekly plan, it feels efficient, it feels smart. But it's easy to forget that you're not exercising something anymore. What is that? Your own mind, which is such a dangerous thing not to exercise properly. Your mind's always working, but if you don't exercise it properly, breakdown happens. And here's what most people don't actually realize. Over 80% of users believe AI, even when it gives the wrong answer, especially if it sounds confident. That's not just a glitch, it's a mirror. Because the more often we outsource friction, the moments where we normally would wrestle with a tough decision or sharpen a skill, the more our brain stops showing up for us. Those neural circuits need exercise, and they will atrophy when we don't use them. The brain needs stimulation. It needs to be built. We need brain building. So we lose what we don't use. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not anti-AI at all. I've used it. We use it in our business all the time. This isn't about fear-mongering or pretending we're above the tools. But we've seen firsthand where it can fumble. We've caught mistakes. And we've learned that the moment you stop checking, the machine starts shaping. In this week's episode, we'll explore the hidden cost of over-relying on AI, what it's doing to your mind and your brain, and how to use it without losing yourself in the process. If you're here, it's not because you needed one more tech tip. You're here because something in you is asking to think more clearly, to live more intentionally, and to not hand over your agency to whatever sounds smartest. Subscribing doesn't just keep this show in your feed, it gives you space each week to reset how you relate to the tools that you use. And to remember, your mind is so worth protecting. So if this conversation helps you find language clarity, or even just 30 minutes of slower, deeper thought, subscribe. Let the space anchor you. Let it remind you who you are when you're not rushing. Now let's continue with today's episode. Let's start with something most of us have done without even deliberately and consciously thinking about what we're doing. You're writing a work email and you don't know how to phrase it, so you ask AI to make it sound more professional. You're submitting a grant application or drafting an important report and want AI to clean it up. Nothing wrong with that. But then you get a little more comfortable. You ask it to summarize a legal contract or write a therapy-style response to your friend or help draft a waiver, and you copy it without reading it closely. And here's where that slippery slope starts. We don't notice when the delegation turns into disconnection, when the tool actually becomes the default, when our own voice starts to just fade beneath something that sounds smoother, better, more confident. I've had friends, brilliant people, tell me they're starting to feel like they don't know how to write on their own anymore. And when that happens, something deeper is being outsourced than just syntax. It's identity, it's authorship, it's ownership of your voice. The line between assistance and dependency is really thin, and AI doesn't draw it for you. You have to. And that's one thing I've done in my business. I don't mind using AI, my team using AI to do structural things and flow things and organizational things, but when it comes to me writing, I never use AI. I use me, my mind. We're in an age where AI doesn't support us. It quietly shapes how we think, speak, and even relate to others. It's helping us be productive, but it's also helping us forget how to think through friction. And when the friction disappears, so does the edge that helps us feel what's real. And that's really worrying. Your brain is neuroplastic, which means that you with your mind change your brain. Your brain is always changing. You are physically reshaping your brain based on repeated activity or inactivity that you're doing with your mind. The brain merges with the environment you focus on. If you stop working, your memory pathways weaken. If you stop engaging in problem solving, your executive function dims. If you stop challenging yourself to make hard decisions, those circuits lose strength and you won't tap into your intuition. A study by Sparrow and et al. In 2011 found that people were significantly less likely to remember facts if they believed they could access the information later online. It's called the Google effect. The mind makes a decision, I don't need to hold this. Not a good thing. Another study by Risco and Dunn in 2015 found that repeated cognitive offloading leads to decreased engagement of memory and retrieval systems, which means your memory is getting worse. And your ability to really draw on intuition and wisdom and intelligence is getting less. Your intelligence is dropping. Our brain functions at its best when it's being built up with knowledge. I call this brain building. The Google effect doesn't build the brain, it breaks down the brain. But that kind of disengagement really feels dramatic. You don't wake up one day and say, I've lost my mental sharpness. It's more subtle. It's cumulative. You reach for a thought and it's not there. You try to write from scratch and you feel blank. You find yourself needing prompts to do what used to come naturally. Someone recently told me that they felt like they couldn't think clearly without a template. That really worried me. Not because they weren't intelligent, but because their mental muscles hadn't been used in weeks. Everything they'd written recently was rephrased, restructured, or auto-generated. That terrifies me, I'll be honest with you. And it wasn't just a creative block, it was a cognitive shift that had happened. They weren't practicing clarity, they were outsourcing it. Now layer in AI. If you're using it to write everything, summarize everything, brainstorm everything, your brain isn't firing the same way. You are not rehearsing clarity, you're delegating it. And over time, what's going to happen? Delegation without discernment becomes dullness. Not always dysfunction, but a quiet kind of distance from your own thinking. The hard part is that it doesn't feel like a problem at first. It feels like you're being efficient. But that efficiency may come at the cost of integration and you tapping into intuition. There's a misconception. And the misconception is that AI is objective and accurate. Not right. It's not correct. It feels true. The tone is confident. The language is fluent. And our brains are wired to equate fluency with correctness. Your brain just does what your mind tells it to do. Your brain doesn't think. It doesn't judge. It doesn't correct. It just feels, okay, this is good flow. I'm okay. But AI is trained to predict the next word, not verify the truth. That means if your input has bias, the output likely mirrors it. And because it's packaged with confidence, you're more likely to believe it and not question it. You lose your curiosity. That is called automation bias. In fact, research shows that over 80% of users believe incorrect AI responses simply because they sound authoritative. We respond to authority, and if they sound authoritative, people believe them. Over 80% of people are sometimes believing nonsense. And here's the emotional danger. When you use AI to draft an apology, a diagnosis, or generate parenting advice, and it gets something wrong, the harm isn't just informational, it's relational, it's personal, it could even be dangerous. Because when it sounds correct, your guard drops. Your instinct quiets. You stop double-checking. Just think when someone speaks with confidence and wisdom. You listen. And that's the real risk. It's not just believing something that's inaccurate, but letting something inaccurate shape your decisions, your relationships, your sense of self. Guys, we've got to question this. It's one thing for AI to hallucinate a citation. It's another for it to distort how you respond to someone you love. What happens when we stop noticing? I'll be honest, we've had our own AI fumbles. We used AI to help with a social media post once. It looked polished, so we trusted it. But later, we found out that part of the caption text was garbled, like it had pulled half a thought from somewhere else and stitched it in some weird way. At the same time, we relied on AI to assist with research citations. They looked legitimate until we actually followed the links and realized the numbers were off, or the studies didn't say what the AI claimed they did. And here's the thing, we missed it entirely. We didn't catch it until after it went out. We own those mistakes. We corrected them. We embraced the friction. We grew. We corrected them, they happened. And they reminded us of something simple but critical. Smart tools need even smarter humans. Okay? We run AI like we run our brains. Because the moment you assume the machine is right, is the moment you stop verifying. And the moment you stop verifying is when your discernment starts to atrophy. You literally block out wisdom. That's not a software issue, it's a human one. And the scariest part wasn't the garbled sentence or the bad citation. It was how easily we let our attention drift. How natural it felt to say, this looks good enough, and move on. We were busy, we made a mistake, we didn't check, we didn't embrace the friction. We had to come back to a different kind of rigor, a different kind of authorship, the kind that asks, does this reflect what we actually meant to say? Does this sound like me? Would we stand by this if I was challenged? Because the truth is, the machine doesn't shape the message alone. We do. Every time we let something slide in the name of speed or ease. And that's the real discipline now. Not perfection, but being present. Our minds weren't designed to avoid effort. In fact, biologically and psychologically, we are wired to grow through resistance. It's not just a character trait, it's how the mind actually strengthens itself. Every time you wrestle with a thought, solve a hard problem, make sense of a complex emotion, learn something new, you're building your brain with your mind. When we let AI take the friction out of thinking, we are removing something essential. Struggle is how we build cognitive muscle. It's how we learn what matters, how to adapt, how to make meaning. It's how we tap into the wisdom of our non-conscious. It's how we grow as humans. It's how we become decent humans. That cognitive friction is very uncomfortable, but it's very necessary. Messiness is necessary. But it's also clarifying. Have you ever sat down to write something hard, a speech, an apology, a boundary, and found that your first few sentences were a total mess? But as you kept going, something clear started to form? That's friction. That's your mind helping your brain to do what it was made to do. AI skips that part. It gives you the polished version up front, and it's a mirror, it's not the truth. It's gathered algorithmically from all over the place. It's not you. It's not coming out of your wisdom. And sure, that's helpful. But if you start relying on that polish every time, you stop flexing the part of your mind that makes meaning through the mess. Here's a real-world version of that. I know someone who used to love journaling. It was their way of sorting out complex thoughts and whatever. But lately, they've been feeding prompts into AI to reflect for them. And they said, it's faster, but it's like the thoughts aren't mine anymore. That is key. They aren't yours. They just mirrors algorithmically taken from data around the world. They're not generating. They're not creative. You are creative. Your mind is creative. Your mind is quantum in its nature. AI is simply algorithmic. Because without friction, we don't just lose the opportunity to wrestle. We lose the opportunity to feel ownership over what emerges. Without challenge, we lose the depth that struggle was designed to give us. I mean, we learn through the tough stuff. And the more we automate our insights, the less we metabolize them. Let's sit for a moment with something a little heavier. There's a growing trend of people turning to AI for things that feel less like convenience and more like emotional outsourcing. It's not just about drafting a resume or fixing grammar anymore. People are asking AI to process their trauma, to write an apology letter, to explain the anxiety to a partner. They're using it to generate self-soothing affirmations. And on the surface, that might seem harmless, even innovative, but it's dangerous. But we have to ask, what happens when we feel more emotionally seen by a machine than by another human? AI is always available. It doesn't judge. It mirrors your tone because it's not human. It doesn't have that energy that radiates from our creativity. That accessibility makes it very attractive, especially for people who don't feel safe in traditional relationships or therapy settings or have a bit of social anxiety. But AI doesn't feel. It doesn't feel with you. It doesn't sense your nervous system. If it sounds like it's becoming smarter, it's because we're smarter. It doesn't adjust to the quiver in your voice or pause when you start to cry. It doesn't ask follow-up questions rooted in love, care, or concern. It just responds with fluency, but not presence. There's a neurobiological difference between processing your feelings in solitude and processing them with another nervous system, a real person with a mind that can think generatively. That's what co-regulation is. That's what trauma-informed connection is built on. When AI becomes the sounding board, we risk replacing relational healing with reflective mimicry, and we are designed as humans for deep, deep, meaningful connection. AI cannot give that because it's not conscious. AI doesn't challenge you. If you tell it something based on a distorted belief, like, I ruin every relationship I'm in, it might validate your emotional experience because it's algorithmic. It's just taking your words and reflecting them or mirroring them back at you. But it won't always reframe your narrative in a trauma-aware, growth-orientated way. It doesn't pull you back into your values. It doesn't gently interrupt your loops. And that's not because it's cruel. It's because it doesn't know any better. AI doesn't think, your mind thinks. Your mind is what makes your brain work. Your mind is what makes AI work. This isn't to say that it has no place in mental health conversations, but it cannot replace real intimacy, real challenge, real listening, and real healing. Just because the machine agrees with you doesn't mean you're right. Sometimes it just means you trained it that way. Think about that for a moment. Because AI is something that's trained on algorithmic data adding up. And when you keep asking a tool that only knows how to echo, you'll eventually mistake that echo for truth. Because whatever you think about the most will grow. And then you are basically telling your brain to merge with something that's not truth. You won't realize you're looping until you're so deep in validation you stop seeking wisdom. That's a real key. The hard thing about discernment is that it often sounds different than what you want to hear. But that's a good thing. See, that's the whole thing with discernment. AI is just going to feed back what you want to hear. Just because the machine agrees with you doesn't mean you're right. Sometimes it just means you trained it that way. And when you keep asking a tool that only knows how to echo, you'll eventually mistake that echo for truth. You won't realize you're looping until you're so deep in validation you stop seeking wisdom. The hard thing about discernment is that it often sounds different than what you want to hear. Love says, that might not be the whole story. Truth says, that belief needs revisiting. Wisdom says, sit with the discomfort. It's trying to teach you something. Just because the machine agrees with you doesn't mean you're right. Sometimes it just means you trained it that way. And when you keep asking a tool that only knows how to echo, you'll eventually mistake that echo for truth. You won't realize you're looping until you're deep in validation. You stop seeking wisdom. The hard thing about discernment is that it often sounds different than what you want to hear. Love says that might not be the whole story. Truth says that belief needs revisiting. Wisdom says sit with the discomfort. It's trying to teach you something. AI doesn't say any of those things. It reflects, it smooths, it affirms, it polishes, but it cannot disrupt you into growth. And sometimes that disruption, that gentle, loving confrontation is exactly what we need to become who we are trying to be. AI can make you feel heard. AI can make you feel heard, but it cannot make you whole because echoes aren't love and algorithms don't care who you become. And maybe that's the most sobering part. Because growth, real growth, often comes wrapped in challenge, not comfort, not fluency, but friction again. The kind that only shows up when another human looks at you and says, I hear you, but let's slow down and unpack that. And that's something no machine has ever been able to do for me, and it won't ever be able to do. Just because the machine agrees with you doesn't mean you're right. Sometimes it just means you trained it that way. And when you keep asking a tool that only knows how to echo, you'll eventually mistake that echo for truth. You won't realize you're looping until you're so deep in validation, you stop seeking wisdom. The hard thing about discernment is that it often sounds different than what you want to hear. That's always the sore part. Love says, that might not be the whole story. Truth says, that belief needs revisiting. Wisdom says, sit with the discomfort. It's trying to teach you something. AI doesn't say any of those things. It reflects, it smooths, it affirms, it polishes, but it cannot disrupt you into growth. And sometimes that disruption, that gentle, loving confrontation is exactly what you need. AI can make you feel heard, but it cannot make you feel whole. Because echoes aren't love, and algorithms don't care who you become. And maybe that's the most sobering part. Because growth, real growth, often comes wrapped in challenge, not comfort. Not fluency, but friction again. the kind that only shows up when another human looks at you and says, I hear you, but let's slow down and unpack that. And that's something no machine has ever been able to do for me. So what do? We use it. But we use it with awareness, with discernment, with our minds engaged, not outsourced. Here are 3 ways I think about it. Let it offer options, not conclusions. Huge difference. Options are choices, conclusions are finite. Sometimes I'll prompt AI to brainstorm ideas for a keynote or a campaign. What it returns might not feel right, but when that happens, it gives me clarity. I get to question. I get to notice what doesn't sit well, and in doing so, get closer to what's actually mine. We judged it. Like your mind manages your brain, your mind must manage AI. So pause before you share anything. When something is going out under your name, or my name, or whoever's name, take a moment to sit with it. I ask, does this feel like me? Would I say it this way to someone face to face? Would I say it in a conversation? There's no rush, just a gut check that brings me back in alignment with who I am. And so often my body tells me what my mind might skip. There's a lightness in the chest. There's a second of hesitation. There's that still small voice. There's that data. It's not about over-analyzing. It's about returning to a place of clarity before committing to a message. See it as a rough sketch, not a mirror. AI can mimic, it can smooth, but it can't carry your history, your empathy, your context, your depth. That's yours. When a response feels too perfect or too agreeable, just too polished, it's worth pausing. It is simply echoing something that's familiar, or it's introducing something meaningful. Question it. Be curious. I found that the most helpful outputs aren't the ones that affirm me, but the ones that nudge me to think in new ways, that make me think, what is this? What's new? What's different? What's right? What's wrong? And more often than not, the clearest insights come when I slow down and become curious and ask these questions. Sometimes I close my eyes and ask, what part of me is reacting to this? What is really trying to be expressed here? And I close my eyes and just let my mind tap into the wisdom of my unconscious. There's no pressure to find the perfect answer, just the space to notice what's emerging and to make sure it aligns with your truth. There's one more layer to this conversation that's been sitting with me. What happens when the next generation learns to trust AI before they've learned to trust themselves? This really worries me. When kids grow up turning to chatbots for guidance because they don't feel safe asking adults, that's not just a tech issue, that's a formation issue, that's a societal issue. We got to look at ourselves. It's easy to focus on convenience, way too easy. But beneath that is the question about consciousness, and the question about relatedness, and the question about our humanity. What kind of inner dialogue gets shaped when the fastest, most fluent response is also the one we never challenged? What are we losing if we outsource not just knowledge, but mentorship, nuance, and moral formation? AI can simulate coherence, it can teach discernment, but it can't do it. We're not just handing off tasks, we're actually shaping what it means to think, reflect, and respond in our generation and all generations. This deserves a whole conversation of its own. But it felt important that I just name it here, because this isn't just about how we work, it's about who we're actually becoming as a society. Let's just land here, because I can talk about this forever. Using AI doesn't mean you're cutting corners, it doesn't mean you're lazy or doing it wrong. Most people engaging with these tools are doing so from a place of curiosity, optimization, or sheer necessity. The truth is, you're navigating a human experience inside a world that's accelerating faster than most of us were built for. Wanting help, needing clarity, or feeling foggy some days doesn't make you broken, it just makes you real, it makes you human. But staying conscious in that world, that is powerful. Don't hand off your core, don't hand off you. We don't lose ourselves to tools, we lose ourselves when we stop noticing. And noticing is still available to you. Noticing means that you're engaging your wise mind, your non-conscious mind. There's something inside you that still knows when something feels off. But if you don't try, you're going to lose the sense of that. Something in you that pauses, tune into that. Something in you that questions, tune into that. Something in you that reflects, tune into that. That part isn't broken. It's alive. It's your non-conscious. It's your wisdom. And maybe what this episode is really about is really honoring that part. Because when we remember to engage, not just consume, when we slow down enough to notice what feels like ours, what feels like me, what feels like us, when we stop waiting for a tool to validate us and instead choose to listen inward, phew, then I'm happy. That's when something shifts. That's when we tune into what we've got inside at the depths of who we are, and that is our non-conscious wisdom. Everything you need is there. That's when we stop outsourcing the most powerful tool we've ever had. What's that? Your non-conscious mind. And what does that do? It changes everything. If that idea hits something in you, if this podcast touched something in you, if you've been looking for another way to recenter when everything just feels like it's speeding up, Help in a Hurry is where I unpack the tools I've used to do just that. It's science-backed, deeply human, and it's out August 5th. Pre-order now at helpinaHurrybook.com, and you'll also get over $900 in exclusive bonuses created for the moments when you need something to hold on to. Thanks for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you next time.